Our incubator has one golden rule. We do not invest in any company. So that's one of the first messages, one of the first takeaways that we provide to candidates, to people that apply for incubation here, is that we always say all the money is yours, and all the money that you collect is yours, and all the money that you will spend in your project is yours. We will not put money in any projects. We are not investors in that sense. But on the other hand, we do have a large network and a huge experience on, for instance, putting these projects in contact with VCs and providing some support on that. Additionally, and that's something which we are now recovering a bit after this tragic pandemic time, is the network between companies and from companies with different size. Let's take the case of P3D. P3D began in 2011, 2013 as a company, of course, a small company with 2 people. Nowadays, they are far bigger. And they are in our business accelerator now, which is another building, so a larger building, allowing companies to stay for longer periods and for us to have different sized companies altogether. And that network effect nowadays brings the chance, for instance, for a new startup, for instance, focused also on medtech. And why not on medtech imaging techniques, to be incubated again, and which can have a project with them, a joint project. So this effect of network is one of the biggest assets that companies can retrieve from their presence in the incubator. And on top of that, some let's say cheaper fees for their rental of space and so on, and the prestige of being associated with this incubator, which was so the cradle for very successful projects in the country in different areas, not only IT, health, and so on. But this is, let's say, a wide offer that we have for the companies, for any startup, and especially for those that are arising from the university, those spin-off companies. The trust of the university on the potential of the project. So in the beginning, the university bear the costs for the first patents, so the first phase of these costs at least, waiting for them to incorporate the company and then to apply for VC fund. And then those VC funds, they were responsible for part of that money in the beginning for the payment of all these very heavy fees. And as I mentioned, once I've heard one other presentation from João Barreto, where he pointed out that in the first years of operation, so IP costs accounted for roughly 30% of their budget, which is a huge figure, in fact. But this was a balance in the early stage phase from the university, together then with the evolution of this project towards VC. For sure, and this is the negative point, or the, let's say, the dark side of these projects. Anytime a company doesn't get that funding from the VCs, sometimes that's the end of the line. And unfortunately, that's the case because, of course, an university cannot bear costs for a long time of patents, especially the national phase, so the 30 months onwards phase, with the heaviest costs involved and all the annual fees on top of that. So for sure, the university budget cannot cope with that. So that's where we can, let's say, identify the valley of death of some of these projects, is the moment where they cannot reach for additional funding for them to cope with these expenses, and the university, so prior to that, is not able to follow anymore those efforts. So that was the dark side of some very promising projects, in fact, and we also witnessed some of these failures. But on top of that, and I think that's the most happiest, or the happiest point, is that this case brings us a very successful approach to that trend of so beginning all the track of using patents to enhance value, and then to collect money to cope with those expenses. There's a kind of a mixed approach, but essentially the biggest trend for them is to work out as a B2B and a solution provider to those big players in the market. sure they do not have any intention to be a player, because this sector is dominated by those very, very big companies, worldwide global companies. So their trend is much more to create some add-ons that they can license to these big players. So in order for them to enhance their equipments and so on. So that's basically their trend, as far as I know, and for sure there are always some kind of secrecy things here around, so that we are not prepared to disclose, because, as you know, the company strategy. But in fact, that as far as I know, this is the biggest. So their biggest trend is to work out as a B2B provider, solution provider, let's say as a side offer, to have some small products owned by them and traded directly by them, especially in that support for surgery things, because they are quite simpler rather than those image enhancing techniques that will need to be embedded in heavier or in bigger equipment. So let's role play a case of a spin-off company. So staying with a company with the same nature as this one, as Perceive3D. So a company arising from R&D performed in university. So the first one, of course, to have a good contact and good connection with the TTO, and to have a good license deal, providing you and allowing you your freedom of operation. So that's critical for any company to be entitled to be in the market, because sooner or later, someone will question that, will put that into equation. So what are you doing here? Did you invent this in your garage, or did you bring it with you from your research lab? And you need to have that answer on your hand. So I have a letter of comfort, I have a comfort letter, I have a letter of intention from the rectory, or I have a license deal. So I'm fully entitled to be here, and everyone knows that I'm here. Okay, that's really, really important. The second, of course, to strong bet on IP. So to have a strong, and since day one, just like these guys did, so to have your biggest concern on the protection of your essential assets, because once again, any VC will ask you for that, for your IP strategy. And of course, we are aware that some projects are easier to protect, or at least are more obvious how to protect them. So when we have a device, when we have technique, when we can apply for a patent, in any time we can apply for a brand. But nowadays it is more and more important to design protection as well, so to cover some lack of chance of protecting through patents and utility models and so on. So bringing attention to design as well, trade secrets, copyright. So looking to the whole IP system and apply it effectively to your project. As the third one, so to seek for support from an incubator, to seek for support, and not to stay, let's say, by yourself in the market, unless you have a great team of experienced people that were already involved in past experiences with regard to the exploitation of technology, with the launching of a company. But if you are, let's say, pioneers on that, if you are newcomers to the scene, it is essential to be backed up by an incubator, by a team, by someone which can provide support in the early stage phase of your project, because that is the time when some of the biggest mistakes are committed, are made, and some things can happen that can be the end of a potentially successful story.